Good evening, everyone. How are you? Well, it has been a very interesting time in the world of politics, with reform in particular. As you may be aware, what has been uh, portrayed as literally a grown up boy's ego spat, which invariably has been something much more serious, and ultimately somebody has been telling a few porcupines, and I wonder if you can guess who. Reform has literally been a vehicle for Farage and vice versa. But let's not forget that between January 2020 and June 2024, Nigel Farage had made zero contribution to the Reform Party, going from 1% in the polls to 16, 17, 18% or more, depending when you are and whose poll you are looking at. It was at the height of Reform's momentum last year that Nigel, for whatever reason, decided to come out of retirement and then stand for Clacton, and the rest we know. Reform had the loyal support not just of the hundreds of thousands, indeed on election day over 4 million voters, but the hundreds of candidates who fought tirelessly to campaign for reform, and all of their volunteers who were helping them with their campaigns, helping them deliver flyers, helping them knock on doors, and so on and so forth. After the election, there's an element that you, the public, may not be aware of, and that is that dozens, indeed hundreds of these candidates have gradually been pushed out for the most trivial of reasons, making way for defecting conservatives or people who were brand new, but where reform was concerned, were not going to question what they were told. Those of us who stood for reform obviously believed in the reform's principles, core values on everything from the economy to interest on quantitative easing to immigration and so on and so forth. But one of the key principles of reform was free speech. But unfortunately, in that regard, that was not to be the case, because since the election, candidate after candidate have been stood down for simply saying something that the party doesn't agree with. Many have been stood down without any genuine reason whatsoever. If you're to check the work that these candidates have done, the MPs have done, the 5 MPs, you'll see that Rupert Lowe by far has worked the hardest, with well over 100 questions raised to Parliament, compared to 10 or 20 at the most from the other 4. Rupert Lowe has worked tirelessly, and he has stuck to key Reform UK principles, whereas it could be said that from the minute Nigel Farage entered Parliament, he has acted as though he has been neutered. I don't know what the reason is. None of us know. But some of the key principles that people voted for have been gradually shut down, sidelined, watered down, or even not mentioned. In fact, it's only a few weeks ago that Nigel Farage actually said that he would support Shamima Begin being allowed to return to the UK. He has done a U-turn on mass deportations. He has moved his position and the party increasingly to the centre ground. Perhaps he is eyeing up stealing voters from the Liberal Democrats or more from Labour. But this is where we need to ask ourselves, are we going to stand on principle, or are we going to simply say whatever we believe is going to give us the most votes? There is a constant dilemma with anyone who wants to stand, and that is, if you are standing for change, you are going to face resistance. And over the last few years, politics has become increasingly polarized, and therefore that resistance is fiercer and more toxic than it ever was. Is that a reason to back down from the very reasons that you stood for, or for the very reasons that people supported you and even voted for you? As a brave lady once said, you either stand on principle or you don't stand for anything at all. And I completely agree with that. It's been said by many people in the know, including Ben Habib in the recent week, quite correctly, that no self-respecting politician would consider standing for reform now in case they are treated in the same way that Rupert Lowe has been treated. And yes, of course, in the polls, there was one on GB News, I believe, this evening. Hardly anybody outside of politics would know Rupert Lowe. Quite understandable. That doesn't mean that just because Nigel Farage is far more well known, especially due to his appearances on Get Me Out of Here or whatever it was, that doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. Well, what clearly is untrue are the allegations that Nigel Farage claimed have been made against Rupert Lowe, because all of his staff have made public declarations that he has never mistreated them and has always been a gentleman. And I can tell you from an inside source that will be revealed in the fullness of time that this statement from Rupert Lowe's staff is absolutely true. Therefore, if Rupert Lowe is telling the truth, which I have no doubt that he is, somebody else is not telling the truth. But then we need to then look at other areas reform supporters and voters have or may have been misled. Just a couple of weeks ago, Nigel Farage announced that he no longer owned any shares in the Reform Party UK Limited, and he was now democratising the party. What he failed to reveal was that no, he did not own any shares in Reform UK or Reform Party UK Limited, because all the shares in that limited company have been given to a new company called Reform 2025. This company is owned exclusively by Nigel and Zia, meaning that now Richard Tice has also been cut out. Is that going in the direction of democratizing the party or not? I'll let you make the decision on that one. But one thing is clear, that irreparable damage has been done, and this may well have been the final nail in the coffin. There were others. There was the gaffe by Richard Tice a couple of months ago when he referred to a large portion of their supporters as that lot, alienating some of the most loyal, patriotic people in the country in one short interview on GB News. And then that went further because Nigel Farage also stepped in to show his contempt for all of these people. We've then had the misinformation about the party allegedly democratizing, and now this. And we haven't even got to the issues behind the scenes. The candidates who have been treated appallingly, the way that they have been pushed out, and the only candidates who have been left or allowed to stay are either doormats or they have some sort of political eye candy. They're there simply because they are well known. When Reform UK opens its arms to somebody such as Charlie Mullins, who was a staunch Remainer, they have allowed somebody to enter the inner circle of the party who stood for everything that Reform UK was formed to stand against. Its history, its previous name was the Brexit Party. How can you have a staunch Remainer join the Brexit Party, albeit in a different incarnation? And even some of the MPs, or rather potential MPs, candidates who have moved over to Reform, appear to come further and further from the left. So is this simply about saying what needs to be said to make the party more electable by pandering to those who are to the left of centre and beyond, rather than standing on principle? And though many of you who are lifelong Farage fans may believe everything that he said, and you may believe the narrative that Rupert Lowe is a troublemaker and Rupert Lowe has caused this, I would disagree with you, because this party should have stuck with its core principles, because the core principles of Reform do reflect the majority. It is simply the misinformation through the media, and mainly left-wing controlled globalist media, that prevented Reform in its pure form from gaining even more votes, even more positive exposure. But sadly, I believe that now this has, or may well have been, shattered. Only time will tell. What I can be certain of is that I am aware of many disillusioned former candidates who gave their all, paid for their own campaigns, campaigned tirelessly for these core values, and the reward for their efforts was that they were not just ceremoniously booted out of the party, but disrespectfully booted out of the party. Within the party, there are people who reflect Nigel Farage's control, and they obviously remain within the party. And unless these people are removed, then I'm afraid it is a downhill slide. We've then seen the appalling behaviour of Lee Anderson with the fanatic Remain campaigner, I've forgotten his name at the moment, which is not the behaviour one would expect from an MP. And at the same time, something that riled me, as you know, at the time, which I would not have anything to do with, was somebody coming out of nowhere, buying himself into the party with a large contribution, being allowed to leapfrog everybody and become a chairman, and then seducing everyone with a professionally prepared speech that was deceptively choreographed for maximum effect, simply so that he could exert his influence for his own reasons, which I will once again allow you to join up the dots. And he is demonstrating that he is even more of an autocrat than Nigel Farage. And sadly, the damage has been done, leaving millions of patriotic people politically homeless for now. All I can say is get your popcorn out, keep watching, because I expect things to change dramatically in the future. We're only 7 weeks away from the local elections. We're not going to see anything new prior to that. But after the local elections, I do expect political changes across the board. There's going to be people such as Ed Miliband probably sacked from the current government, if we can call them that. I expect a change of leadership in the Conservatives, and what will happen to reform, or who will replace reform, who knows. But one thing is for certain, that reform, or rather the Farage party as it has now become, will not survive and certainly will not win the next election as it is now. Reform does not or should not belong to Nigel Farage or Richard Tice or Zia Yusuf. It belongs to the people who put their faith in it, who put their time into it, and who dedicated so much effort to make it what it became for the election last year. And for this party to literally resurrect itself from the ashes that it has now become, I am of the opinion that all of them need to resign, and the party needs to become truly democratic, because our country is sinking. And if reform were genuinely democratic, they would have had a democratic process in place immediately after the election, so that a prospective candidate could be elected by local members in every single constituency around the country, and their job would have been to give the sitting MP hell. And that would not be a very difficult job, because I don't see any of them doing a good job. And that is what should have been going on from the day after the election until the day of the next election. But because this is not Reform the People's Party, but rather the Farage Party, then we have lost valuable time, and we have lost many opportunities to hold the MPs to account for what they have done, be it voting on the winter fuel allowance, be it all of the ridiculous laws that they have been toying with. And as we are seeing now, nearly everything that they had planned has been ill thought out. The budget has been catastrophic. The public purse is running out faster than they can top it up. Heat pumps are a disaster. EVs, who knows? Let's see what happens. Immigration, boats, smashing of the gangs. Do you remember how many times Starmer said we'll smash the gangs? Have any of you seen any undercover video footage of gangs? And how do these people who come from poverty manage to come up with thousands of pounds allegedly to pay these gangs? And then they get on a boat and they have new phones, and their phones are fully charged. Are we talking about gangs, or is there some larger organization that I won't mention at the moment actually organizing this? And there are really no gangs whatsoever. Maybe the odd few people here or there profiteering, but are they really being organized by gangs? Because Starmer certainly has not been able to smash any gangs, probably because he can't find them. They have become irrelevant within Europe, on the world stage, because they really don't know what they're doing. And that makes what is happening now with reform even more alarming, because as I see it, for the time being, we really don't have any better option. I'd love to hear your thoughts, as always, whether you agree or disagree. Thank you very much. Bye bye for now, and I'll see you next time.